The red warning lights flashed across the Galactic Council chamber as Ambassador Thys received the emergency transmission. Her long, thin fingers trembled as she read the message from the Volani Federation. The words made her stomach turn cold. 12 systems lost. 3 million civilians dead or missing. Krex Empire advancing on our core worlds. Request immediate military assistance. Thys had served on the Council for 40 years. She had seen border disputes and trade wars, but nothing like this. The Krex Empire was supposed to be contained in the Outer Rim, fighting among themselves as they always did. Now they were moving through Volani space like a wildfire, burning everything in their path. She called an emergency session of the Council. Representatives from 30 different species gathered in the Great Hall, their various forms of communication creating a buzz of worry throughout the chamber. The Altarians clicked their mandibles nervously. The Xantharis fur stood on end. Even the usually calm Meridians shifted uneasily on their floating platforms. The situation is worse than we feared, Thys announced to the assembly. The Krex have unified under a new warlord called Grakthar. They are not just raiding anymore. They want to build an empire. Council President Vorn, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like granite, leaned forward. What do our military advisors say? General Kelm, the Council's top military mind, stood up slowly. His blue skin had turned pale. The Krex fighting style is brutal. They do not follow any rules of war. They attack civilians. They use weapons designed to cause maximum pain. Our forces are trained for civilized combat. We fight with honor. They do not. How many casualties did we take in the last engagement? Asked Councillor Murthak. 60%, Kelm replied quietly. The chamber fell silent. 60% casualties was unheard of in galactic warfare. Most conflicts ended when one side reached 10% losses. We need warriors, said President Vorn finally. Real warriors, not soldiers trained in civilized combat. We need beings who understand true fighting. Thys pulled up the galactic database on her console. She searched for species classified as militaristic or combat capable. Most of the results showed the usual suspects: the Corvan Defense Forces, the Altarian Guard, the Meridian Peacekeepers. All of them followed the same basic rules of engagement that had failed against the Krex. Then she found something strange. A small entry at the bottom of the list caught her eye. It was a species listed as developing from a system called Sol. The planet was marked as Class 12 Deathworld, quarantined for safety. What about this one? She asked, highlighting the entry. General Kelm looked at the data and frowned. Humans, they are barely space-capable. They only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Why would they be in the military database? Thys dug deeper into the files. What she found made her eyes widen. The humans had something called military history that went back thousands of years. They had fought wars involving millions of soldiers. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had conflicts that lasted decades. Look at this, she said, projecting the data for everyone to see. These humans have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. They have something called professional armies and military academies. They study war like we study science. But they are primitives, protested Councillor Zextar. They still use chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Maybe that is exactly what we need, Thys said thoughtfully. The Krex do not expect primitive tactics. They have adapted to fight our energy weapons and our defensive strategies. But these humans, they might think differently. President Vorn studied the human data carefully. It says here they come from a death world. What does that mean? General Kelm pulled up the planetary classification system. Class 12. Death world means the planet is extremely hostile to life. High gravity, dangerous weather, large predators, frequent natural disasters. Most species cannot even visit such worlds safely. Yet these humans evolved there, Thys noted. They did not just survive on a death world. They became the dominant species. The chamber buzzed with discussion. The idea was crazy, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The Volani had lost 3 more colonies while they debated. They needed help, and they needed it fast. How many warriors should we request? Asked President Vorn. General Kelm thought about it. The Krex usually attack with forces of about 50 fighters. If these humans are as capable as their history suggests, maybe we ask for 100? That should be more than enough. Thys composed the message carefully. She wanted to be respectful but urgent. These humans might be their last hope. To the leaders of the human species on planet Earth, she wrote, the Galactic Council formally requests military assistance in defending peaceful worlds from an aggressive enemy. We require a small force of your finest warriors to help protect innocent civilians. Time is critical. Please respond with your decision as soon as possible. She sent the message through the quantum communication network and waited. The reply came back in less than 6 hours, much faster than expected from such a distant world. Thais opened the message and read it aloud to the assembled council. Message received and understood. Threat assessment completed. United Earth Navy Expeditionary Force deploying immediately. Estimated arrival in 14 days. Admiral Park, Earth Defense Command. The chamber fell silent again. This time it was not fear but confusion. Expeditionary Force? General Kelm repeated slowly. We asked for warriors, not a force. How big is an expeditionary force? Asked President Vorn. Thys checked the human military database again. Her face went pale as she read the numbers. According to their records, a human expeditionary force typically consists of 2,000 to 5,000 soldiers. 5,000, gasped Councillor Murthak. We asked for 100. Maybe there was a translation error, suggested someone from the back of the chamber. But Thais was reading more of the human response. There were technical specifications, supply requirements, and something called rules of engagement. The humans were not sending a raiding party or a group of mercenaries. They were sending a professional military unit with logistics support, medical staff, and heavy equipment. What have we done? Whispered General Kelm. In the depths of space, the UEN vessel Indomitable was already underway, carrying 2,000 Earth soldiers toward their first contact with alien warfare. They had no idea that the galaxy considered them primitives from a death world. To them, this was just another peacekeeping mission. The Krex Empire was about to learn that there were worse things in the universe than their own brutality. They were about to meet creatures that had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. The galaxy had called for warriors. Earth was sending something much more dangerous. Professional soldiers who believed in protecting the innocent no matter what the cost. Captain Deho stood on the bridge of the UN Indomitable, watching the blue swirl of hyperspace through the main view screen. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, running final checks on their systems. In 12 hours, they would arrive at the Kepler 442 system and make humanity's first contact with an alien military force. Status report, Deho said calmly. All systems green, Captain, replied Lieutenant Sumin from the navigation station. We are on schedule for system entry at 0800 hours. Marine complement ready for deployment, added Major Sujin through the comm system. All equipment checked and loaded. Deho nodded. The Indomitable was not originally a warship. She had been built as an asteroid mining vessel, designed to crack open space rocks and extract valuable metals. But when Earth received the alien distress call, the engineers had worked around the clock to convert her into a military transport. They had bolted armor plating to her hull, mounted weapons where they could fit them, and filled her cargo bays with everything a military expedition might need. The ship looked rough and ugly compared to the sleek vessels in Earth's official navy. But she was tough, reliable, and big enough to carry 2,000 soldiers along with their equipment, vehicles, and supplies for a 6-month deployment. Captain, called Communications Officer Haiwan. We are receiving a transmission from the Villani command ship. They want to know our intentions. Put them through, Deho ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of what was clearly an alien spacecraft. The being who appeared was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. She wore what looked like a military uniform, though it was unlike anything in Earth's databases. This is Admiral Telmara of the Villani Defense Fleet, the alien said in accented but clear English. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in this system. Admiral Telmara. This is Captain Deho of the United Earth Navy vessel Indomitable. We are responding to your request for military assistance against the Krex Empire. The alien's large eyes grew even wider. You are the warriors the Council requested? Yes, ma'am. We have a full expeditionary force ready for deployment. There was a long pause. Admiral Telmara seemed to be consulting with someone off-screen. When she turned back, she looked confused. Captain Deho, our records show that we requested a small contingent of fighters, perhaps 100 individuals at most. Our sensors indicate your vessel is quite large. Deho glanced at Major Sujin, who had joined him on the bridge. She shrugged slightly. They had both read the alien message, and it had asked for military assistance. In Earth's military, that meant sending enough force to get the job done properly. Admiral, we brought what we felt was necessary to complete the mission. 2,000 soldiers, full support staff, and equipment for extended operations. The alien's face went pale. 2,000. That is more warriors than most star systems possess. Ma'am, these are not warriors, Deho corrected gently. These are professional soldiers. There is a difference. Admiral Telmara looked even more confused. I do not understand the distinction. Major Sujin stepped forward. Admiral, may we request permission to come aboard your vessel? It might be easier to explain our capabilities and discuss operational planning in person. Of course, the alien replied, though she still seemed uncertain. We will prepare a docking bay for your shuttle. 30 minutes later, Deho and Sujin stepped out of their shuttle into the alien ship's docking bay. The gravity felt lighter than Earth normal, and the air had a strange smell, but their suits compensated automatically. Admiral Telmara was waiting for them with a small group of other aliens. She was even taller than she had appeared on screen, nearly 7 feet tall, but built like a reed. The other aliens were various shapes and sizes, but they all shared the same nervous energy. Welcome aboard the sanctuary, Admiral Telmara said formally. I must admit you are not what we expected. Sujin looked down at her combat uniform and equipment harness. What were you expecting, ma'am? We were told your species were warriors. We expected larger beings, more primitive weapons, perhaps armor made from animal hides. Deho and Sujin exchanged glances. They had read the intelligence reports about the galaxy's military capabilities, but it seemed the aliens had some very strange ideas about Earth. Admiral, Deho said carefully, we have moved beyond animal hides. Our equipment is quite advanced by our standards. Admiral Telmara led them through the ship's corridors to what appeared to be a briefing room. The walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays showing the current military situation. The Kreks have taken 12 of our systems, Admiral Telmara explained, pointing to red markers on the map. They are advancing toward our core worlds. Our fleets have engaged them 3 times, but we cannot match their brutality. What kind of casualties have you taken? Sujin asked. In our last major engagement, we lost 60% of our forces. Sujin's expression remained professional, but Deho could see her surprise. 60% casualties would be considered a complete disaster by Earth standards. What are your standard rules of engagement? Deho inquired. We follow the Galactic Convention on Civilized Warfare, replied another alien, who had been introduced as General Morthak. No targeting of non-combatants. No use of weapons designed to cause unnecessary suffering. Surrender must be accepted when offered. And the Kreks follow these rules? Sujin asked. Admiral Telmara's expression darkened. No. They target civilians deliberately. They use weapons that cause maximum pain. They do not accept surrender, and they do not offer it. Then why do you still follow the rules? Deho asked. The question seemed to shock the aliens. General Morthak looked at him as if he had suggested something unthinkable. Because we are civilized beings, the general said firmly. We do not become monsters just because our enemies are monsters. Sujin nodded approvingly. We agree completely, General. That is why Earth sent professional soldiers instead of warriors. I still do not understand the difference, admitted Admiral Telmara. Warriors fight for glory, revenge, or conquest, Deho explained. Soldiers fight to protect people and to complete missions. Warriors might ignore rules when things get difficult. Soldiers follow rules even when it makes their job harder. But how can you win if you fight with honor against an enemy that has none? Asked General Morthak. Sujin smiled grimly. General, we have been fighting dishonorable enemies for thousands of years. We have learned how to be more effective than them without becoming like them. Show us the tactical situation, Deho requested. Let us see exactly what we are dealing with. Admiral Telmara activated a holographic display that showed the current positions of Krex and Volani forces. The Krex had established forward bases on several moons and were using them to launch raids against civilian targets. They are too well fortified, General Morthak explained. Our previous attacks resulted in heavy casualties with minimal effect. The bases are protected by energy shields and automated defenses. Su-Jin studied the display carefully. What kind of intel do you have on their base construction? Intel? Admiral Telmara repeated. Intelligence, reconnaissance, information about enemy positions, defenses, troop numbers, supply lines. The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. We know they have approximately 50 fighters at each base, General Morthak said finally. That is all? Deho asked. You do not know their weapon types, defensive capabilities, command structure, or logistical support? Why would we need to know those things? Admiral Telmara asked. Su-Jin looked at Deho with an expression that said clearly, we are not in Kansas anymore. Admiral, Deho said patiently, before we can plan any military action, we need detailed intelligence about the enemy. We need to know their strengths, weaknesses, and patterns of behavior. How do you gather such information? Asked General Morthak. Reconnaissance drones, satellite surveillance, signal intercepts, captured documents, prisoner interrogations, Su-Jin listed. Standard intelligence gathering procedures. The aliens stared at them in amazement. It was becoming clear that the galaxy's approach to warfare was very different from Earth's. These beings fought like medieval knights challenging each other to single combat, while Earth had developed industrial-scale military science. Admiral, Deho said finally, I think we need to start from the beginning. Let us show you how Earth handles military operations. Major Su-Jin stood in the tactical planning room aboard the Indomitable, studying the holographic display of Kepler 442c's third moon. The Krex forward base sat in a crater like a metal cancer, its towers and weapons platforms gleaming under the pale light of the distant star. Intelligence confirms approximately 60 Krex fighters at the base, reported Lieutenant Colonel Wubin. Standard Krex construction, energy shields, plasma cannons, and what appears to be a command bunker at the center. What about the civilians? Su-Jin asked. The Krex have been using the base to launch raids on the farming colonies below, replied Commander Hayawan, the expedition's intelligence officer. Latest reports show they captured over 300 Villani civilians 2 days ago. Su-Jin's jaw tightened. The Krex were not just building military positions. They were taking hostages. That changed everything. Admiral Telmara and General Morthak stood at the edge of the planning session, watching the humans work with obvious fascination. The Villani had been fighting the Krex for months with traditional tactics, direct frontal assaults, energy weapon exchanges, and honorable single combat. They had never seen anything like what the humans were preparing. Major Su-Jin, Admiral Telmara said carefully, our previous attempts to retake this position resulted in 60% casualties. The Krex defensive systems are very effective. That is because you have been attacking it wrong, Su-Jin replied without looking up from the tactical display. You have been treating this like a duel instead of a military operation. How would your forces approach this differently? Asked General Morthak. Su-Jin finally looked up. General, we do not just attack enemy positions. We destroy them systematically. She gestured to Master Sergeant Young-Ho, the expedition's demolition specialist. He stepped forward with a tablet showing detailed structural analysis of the Krex base. The Krex built this base using standard prefabricated components, Young-Ho explained in his calm, professional voice. Energy shields, plasma weapons, automated defenses, all very impressive against the kind of attacks they were expecting. What kind of attacks were they not expecting? Admiral Telmara asked. Young-Ho smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Bunker busters. The aliens looked confused. Young-Ho pulled up another display showing a cutaway view of the Krex base. Their shields protect against energy weapons and small projectiles, he continued. But they were not designed to stop large, high-explosive warheads delivered by guided missiles. You intend to use explosive weapons? General Morthak sounded shocked. Among other things, Su-Jin confirmed. Sergeant Young-Ho, what is your assessment? The main shield generator is located here. Young-ho pointed to the center of the base. If we take that out first, the entire defensive grid goes down. Then we can target their weapons platforms, communications array, and command bunker in sequence. How long would this take? Asked Admiral Telmara. 15 minutes for the initial bombardment, Sujin replied. Then ground forces move in to secure the area and rescue any hostages. The alien stared at her in disbelief. 15 minutes? Our last assault took 6 hours and failed. You were fighting fair, Sujin explained. We do not fight fair. We fight to win. Lieutenant Colonel Wubin activated another display showing the orbital positions of Earthships. The Indomitable will provide fire support from orbit. We have converted some of our mining charges into guided munitions. They are not elegant, but they are very effective against fortified positions. You are going to bomb them from space? General Morthak looked horrified. Only the military targets, Sujin assured him. We have strict rules about collateral damage. But yes, we will use every advantage we have. Admiral Telmara studied the human battle plan with growing amazement. The Villani had been thinking in terms of ship-to-ship combat and individual duels. The humans were planning something that looked more like a natural disaster. What about ground forces? She asked. 1st Korean Marine Battalion will handle the assault, Sujin replied. 500 Marines in powered armor supported by combat vehicles and medical teams. 500? General Morthak gasped. Against 60 Kreks? The Kreks are supposed to be elite fighters, Wubin pointed out. We are not taking any chances. Commander Hyawan stepped forward with her medical team's analysis. We have studied Krek's physiology from your databases. They are strong and tough, but they have several vulnerabilities we can exploit. Such as? Admiral Telmara asked. Their armor is designed to deflect energy weapons, but it is weak against kinetic impacts, Haiwan explained. Their hearing is much more sensitive than ours, making them vulnerable to sonic weapons, and their psychology appears to be based on intimidation and fear tactics. How does that help us? General Morthak wondered. Sujin smiled coldly. General, the Kreks use fear as a weapon because it works against species that are not used to violence. But we come from a world where everything is trying to kill us. We are not easily frightened. The planning session continued for 2 more hours. The humans discussed logistics, communication protocols, medical evacuation procedures, and prisoner handling. They planned for every possible contingency, from equipment failures to unexpected enemy reinforcements. Admiral Telmara watched in fascination as the humans worked. She had never seen such detailed military planning. The Villani approach to combat was much simpler. Identify the enemy, charge forward, and hope for the best. These humans treated warfare like a science. One question, she said finally. What if the Kreks refuse to surrender? Then they die, Sujin replied matter-of-factly. We will give them the chance to surrender, but if they choose to fight, we will finish it. And the hostages? Rescue is our primary objective, Commander Haiwan assured her. We have medical teams standing by, and our assault teams are trained in hostage rescue operations. General Morthak looked uncertain. These tactics seem very aggressive. General, Sujin said patiently, the Kreks have been killing your people for months. They have taken hostages. They target civilians. At some point, being polite stops working. But how do you maintain your honor while fighting so brutally? It was Lieutenant Colonel Wubin who answered. General, there is nothing brutal about protecting innocent people. There is nothing dishonorable about being effective. The Kreks chose to make war on civilians. We are simply going to end it quickly. The aliens fell silent, processing this different approach to military ethics. To them, honor meant fighting according to rules, even if those rules led to defeat. To the humans, honor meant protecting people and completing the mission, regardless of what methods were required. When do we begin? Admiral Telmara asked finally. Sujin checked her chronometer. The assault begins in 6 hours. I suggest your ships maintain a safe distance. Things are going to get loud. As the Villani officers left to return to their own ships, Master Sergeant Young-ho began his final preparations. He had spent the past day converting mining charges into precision-guided munitions. The Kreks base had been designed to withstand the galaxy's civilized warfare. It had not been designed to withstand creatures from a world where survival meant being tougher and more ruthless than everything else. In their bunkers on the moon below, the Kreks warriors felt confident in their defenses. They had defeated every previous attack with ease. Their energy shields were impenetrable. Their weapons were superior. They were the strongest, most feared fighters in the galaxy. They had no idea that they were about to face something the galaxy had never seen before. Professional soldiers from a death world who fought with discipline, coordination, and an absolute determination to protect innocent life. The Krex Empire was about to learn that there was a difference between being fierce and being effective. They were about to discover what happened when predators met apex predators from a world where only the smartest and most adaptable survived. The attack began exactly on schedule. From her position on the Volani command ship, Admiral Telmara watched through the main view screen as the human assault unfolded. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Krex base sat in its crater, energy shields glowing softly, weapons platforms scanning the empty space above. Then the sky lit up with fire. The first salvo came from the Indomitable, high in orbit above the moon. What looked like small meteors streaked down through the thin atmosphere, guided by invisible signals toward specific targets on the base below. The Krex defensive systems tried to intercept them, plasma bolts lancing upward into the darkness. They missed every single shot. The modified mining charges hit the base's shield generator with the force of small asteroids. The massive explosion could be seen from space as a brilliant flash that momentarily outshone the distant star. When the light faded, the energy shields that had protected the base for months were gone. "Impossible," whispered General Morthak, standing beside Admiral Telmara. "Those shields were rated to withstand direct hits from our heaviest weapons." "The humans are not using energy weapons," Telmara replied, studying the tactical display. "Those were kinetic projectiles, physical matter moving at extreme velocity." The second salvo targeted the base's weapons platforms. One by one, the plasma cannons and missile launchers that had made the position so dangerous disappeared in clouds of flame and debris. The Krex were firing back, but their weapons were designed for space combat, not precision bombardment from orbit. "Ground assault teams launching," reported the human communications officer over the open channel. "Admiral." Telmara watched as dozens of small craft dropped from the Indomitable toward the moon's surface. They moved in perfect formation, adjusting their approach vectors to avoid the remaining Krex defenses. "How many soldiers are in those transports?" she asked. "According to Major Sujin's briefing, 500 Marines," General Morthak replied, "plus support vehicles and equipment." 500 against 60, Telmara murmured. "It seems excessive." On the moon's surface, the Korean Marines were implementing tactics that the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of charging directly at the enemy positions like traditional galactic forces, they established a perimeter around the entire base. No one could get in or out without their permission. Master Sergeant Young-ho led his demolitions team to the base's outer walls. The Krex had built their fortifications to withstand energy weapons, but they had not considered what would happen when someone simply blew holes in the walls with chemical explosives. "Breach charges set," Young-ho reported calmly into his comm unit. "All teams clear the area." The explosions opened 3 large gaps in the base's outer defenses. Before the dust had settled, Korean Marines were pouring through the openings, their powered armor making them look like mechanical giants in the dim light. The Krex fought back with desperate fury. They were strong, fast, and experienced warriors. Their claws could tear through metal, and their weapons could punch holes through ship armor. In single combat, any one of them could defeat most galactic soldiers. But they were not fighting most galactic soldiers. They were fighting humans who had learned warfare on a world where cooperation meant survival. The Marines moved in coordinated teams, covering each other's advances and retreat. When one team engaged the enemy, another would flank around to attack from a different angle. They used suppressing fire to keep Krex fighters pinned down, while other units moved to better positions. "This is not how warriors fight," General Morthak observed, watching the tactical display. "They are fighting like a single organism with many parts." "That is exactly how they fight," Admiral Telmara realized. "They are not individual warriors. They are parts of a larger military machine." Commander Haiwan's medical teams followed close behind the assault forces, treating wounded Marines and establishing aid stations for rescued hostages. Her people had studied Krex biology and knew exactly how to handle their prisoners, with firm restraint and professional medical care. The fighting inside the base was fierce, but brief. The Krex were brave and skilled, but they had never faced an enemy that used such systematic tactics. Human soldiers would take cover behind debris, coordinate their fire, and advance methodically from room to room. Hostage situation in the main bunker, reported Major Su Jin over the comm. Krek's commander is threatening to execute prisoners if we advance. Admiral Telmara felt her heart sink. This was exactly the kind of situation that had made previous rescue attempts impossible. The Kreks knew that galactic forces would not risk civilian lives. "What is your response?" she asked the human communications officer. "Stand by," came Sujin's calm reply. 2 minutes later, there was another explosion, smaller than the others but precisely placed. The bunker's rear wall simply disappeared, along with the Kreks commander who had been standing near it. "Hostages secured," Sujin reported. "No civilian casualties." "How did they do that?" General Morthak asked in amazement. The answer came from Young Ho's team, who had used shaped charges to create a precise breach in the bunker wall. They had eliminated the threat without endangering the hostages, a technique that required exact knowledge of explosives, architecture, and enemy positioning. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes from first shot to final surrender. When it was over, the Kreks base had been completely neutralized. All hostages had been rescued, and the remaining Kreks fighters were in human custody. The casualty report was even more shocking than the speed of the victory. The Korean Marines had suffered 12 wounded and 0 killed. The Kreks had lost 30 fighters with the remaining 30 taken prisoner. "How is this possible?" Admiral Telmara asked as Major Sujin gave her report. "Our last assault on a similar position cost us 600 lives." "Admiral, you were fighting the way the Kreks expected you to fight," Sujin explained. "Direct assault, energy weapons, individual combat. They had prepared for that kind of attack, and you fought differently. We fought smart. We used intelligence gathering, coordinated tactics, and overwhelming force applied at the right points. The Kreks are tough fighters, but they were not prepared for combined arms warfare." General Morthak studied the after-action reports with growing amazement. "These tactics, they seem almost unfair." Lieutenant Colonel Wu Bin looked up from his tablet. "General, war is not a sporting match. The point is not to fight fairly. The point is to protect innocent people and complete the mission with minimum casualties on your own side. But where is the honor in such methods?" "The honor is in the result," Commander Haiwan said firmly. 300 hostages went home to their families today. 12 of our people were wounded but will recover fully. The Kreks' threat to this system has been eliminated. That is honorable. As word of the human victory spread through the Galactic Council networks, species across the galaxy began to ask questions about these strange beings from the death world called Earth. How could creatures that the Council considered barely civilized defeat the galaxy's most feared warriors so easily? Dr. Minho, the expedition's xenobiologist, found himself trying to explain human evolution to a panel of very confused alien scientists via quantum communication. "Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world," said Counselor Vextan, his voice carrying clearly across the light years. "How do beings from such a world become so organized?" "Counselor, that is exactly why we became organized," Minho replied patiently. "On Earth, cooperation meant survival. The species that learned to work together were the ones that lived long enough to have children. But the violence levels on your world are exactly why we developed rules for warfare," Minho interrupted. "When everyone has weapons that can kill many people quickly, you learn to be very careful about how and when you use them." The implications of this revelation sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. The most dangerous species in known space, creatures from a world so hostile that it was quarantined for safety, were also the most disciplined and ethical warriors the galaxy had ever encountered. They fought not for glory or conquest, but to protect others. They used overwhelming force not out of cruelty, but to end conflicts quickly and minimize casualties. They followed strict rules of engagement not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to afford mercy. The Kreks Empire had built their reputation on being the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Now they had been defeated in 18 minutes by creatures they had never heard of, using tactics they did not understand, for reasons that made no sense to their warrior culture. And this was just the beginning. The second Kreks base fell in 12 minutes. The third took only 8. Captain Deho stood in the conference room aboard the Indomitable, looking at the holographic display that showed the current military situation. 3 days ago, the Krex Empire had controlled 12 star systems and was advancing toward the Volani core worlds. Now their forward bases were gone, their fleet was in full retreat, and their warlord Grakthar was requesting a meeting. They want to negotiate? Admiral Telmura asked in disbelief. The Krex do not negotiate. They conquer or they die. Apparently they are learning new behaviors. Major Sujin replied dryly. Fear is a powerful teacher. The message from Grakthar had been brief and to the point. Krex Empire requests immediate ceasefire with human forces. We wish to discuss terms. Around the table sat representatives from a dozen different species, all members of the Galactic Council who had come to witness the end of the Krex threat. They still looked stunned by how quickly everything had changed. What are your terms? Asked Council President Vorn, his massive form filling nearly half the room. Complete withdrawal from all occupied Volani territory, Deho replied. Return of all captured civilians, reparations for war damages, and a probationary period under human military oversight. You want to occupy Krex space? General Morthak sounded shocked. No, Lieutenant Colonel Wubin corrected. We want to make sure they do not start another war. The Krex military will be restructured according to human standards of professional conduct. Councillor Vextan leaned forward, his translator device struggling with his rapid speech. You intend to teach the Krex how to fight like humans? We intend to teach them how to be soldiers instead of raiders, Commander Hayawan said firmly. There is a difference between strength and brutality. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Krex fleet. Warlord Grakthar himself appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features showing clear signs of stress. I am Grakthar, Supreme Commander of the Krex Empire, he announced in his gravelly voice. I wish to speak with the human war leader. Captain Deho stepped forward. I am Captain Deho of the United Earth Navy. You requested this communication. Grakthar studied the human carefully. He had expected to see a massive warrior covered in scars and trophies, like the great Krex fighters of legend. Instead, he saw a calm professional officer who looked more like a teacher than a conqueror. Your forces have defeated our finest warriors, Grakthar said slowly. How is this possible? You are small. Your weapons seem primitive. Yet you fight like demons from the void. We fight like soldiers, Deho replied simply. We are trained to work together, to think tactically, and to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I do not understand these concepts. That is why your empire failed. Major Sujin interjected, stepping up beside Deho. You fight for conquest and glory. We fight for duty and protection. Your warriors are individuals seeking personal honor. Our soldiers are parts of a team working toward a common goal. Grakthar's eyes narrowed. You speak of weakness as if it were strength. And you speak of cruelty as if it were power, Sujin responded. Tell me, Warlord, how did that work out for you? The silence that followed was profound. Around the conference table, alien representatives watched this exchange with fascination. They were seeing something unprecedented in galactic history. A human military officer, treating the most feared warlord in the galaxy, like a student who had failed an important test. What do you want from the Krex Empire? Grakthar asked finally. We want you to stop being a threat to innocent people, Deho replied. We want you to return what you have stolen and repair what you have broken. And we want to make sure this never happens again. You wish to destroy us? If we wish to destroy you, you would already be destroyed. Lieutenant Colonel Wubin pointed out matter-of-factly. We are offering you a chance to become something better than what you are. Dr. Minho stepped forward, carrying a tablet full of data. Warlord Grakthar, we have studied your species' history. You were not always raiders and conquerors. Your earliest civilizations were actually quite peaceful. That was before we learned strength, Grakthar growled. No, that was before you confused strength with violence, Minho corrected. True strength comes from discipline, cooperation, and the ability to protect others. Violence is just a tool, and like any tool, it can be used wisely or foolishly. The negotiations continued for several hours. The Krex delegation was clearly struggling to understand human concepts of military honor and professional conduct. To them, war was about proving individual superiority through combat. The idea of organized military action for defensive purposes was foreign to their thinking. You will station human forces in our territory? Grakthar asked. Advisors, Deho clarified. Military trainers who will help your forces learn professional standards. You will still command your own military, but you will do it according to civilized rules of warfare. And if we refuse? Major Sujin smiled grimly. Then we will remove your ability to make war entirely. Your choice. The final treaty was signed 3 days later. The Krex Empire agreed to complete withdrawal from Villani space, return of all hostages and stolen property, payment of reparations, and acceptance of human military advisors for a period of 10 years. But the real change came in the aftermath, as word of the human intervention spread throughout the galaxy. Within a week, the Galactic Council received formal requests for military assistance from 17 different species. The Altarian Confederacy wanted help dealing with pirates. The Meridian Republic needed support for their peacekeeping operations. Even the proud Corvan Defense Forces requested training exchanges with human military units. They all want to learn how to fight like humans, Admiral Telmara observed during a meeting on the Indomitable. They want to learn how to win without becoming monsters, Deho corrected. That is a harder lesson, but a more important one. Master Sergeant Young Ho was already working with Villani engineers, teaching them how to build defensive fortifications that could withstand the kind of assault the humans had used against the Krex. His students were eager to learn, but they struggled with human concepts of redundancy and overlapping fields of fire. You plan for everything to go wrong, one young Villani engineer observed. That is because everything usually does go wrong, Young Ho replied with a slight smile. The mark of a good plan is that it still works when half of it fails. Commander Hai Wan established the first human galactic medical exchange program, sharing Earth's advances in trauma surgery and battlefield medicine. She discovered that many galactic species had excellent medical technology for treating diseases and injuries, but they had never developed the specialized techniques needed to save lives during active combat. Your people have a saying, she told a group of alien doctors. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. In military medicine, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of miracles. The final scene took place 6 months later, in the same Galactic Council chamber where Ambassador Thys had first called for help. The emergency session lights were dark now, replaced by the normal glow of routine business. The Human Defense Initiative has exceeded all expectations, President Vorn announced to the assembled representatives. 17 species have requested military advisors. 6 different conflicts have been resolved through human mediation. Piracy in the Outer Rim has dropped by 70%. And the Krex? Asked Counselor Murthak. The Krex Second Fleet has completed their first peacekeeping mission, reported General Morthak with barely concealed amazement. They helped evacuate civilians from a natural disaster on Kepler 186b. Their conduct was exemplary. Ambassador Thys looked around the chamber at faces that showed hope instead of fear for the first time in years. The galaxy had learned that there was more than one way to be strong, and that the most dangerous warriors could also be the most honorable protectors. Captain Deho's final report to Earth Command was simple and direct. Mission accomplished. Threat neutralized. Galactic peace established. Returning to base unless needed for further operations. But everyone knew they would be needed again. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of conflicts and challenges that required more than good intentions to solve. It needed professional soldiers who understood that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and the discipline to use only the force required. The humans had come to the stars as representatives of a Deathworld species that had learned to survive in the most hostile environment imaginable. They had brought with them the lessons of 10,000 years of warfare, refined by the bitter knowledge that the strongest did not always win, but the smartest and most disciplined usually did. The galaxy had called for warriors. Earth had sent something far more valuable, soldiers who fought not for glory but for peace.